Welcome, boys and girls. Costin here with a discussion about Immortal empires, and specifically to talk about Sea Lord Aislinn and the kind of priorities Creative Assembly thinks they need to resolve for his campaign. Because today they just rolled out the 7.02 hotfix. They're also going to roll out the 7.03 hotfix, though apparently they're going to do it in a beta branch because the holiday season is coming out. And so much for the idea that Creative Assembly had devoted significant amount of QA time to dealing with the issues of Tides of Torment. And mind you, those issues are very significant. There's a lot of them. But here's where it gets a bit interesting. Because Creative Assembly, in their blog today, stated that the problem they're working on for Sea Lord Aislinn is that Heralds of Civilization research allows you to gain up to 30k gold by declaring war on minor factions. So let me explain exactly what they're talking about in this situation. This is the Heralds of Civilization research as it is. It gives you visibility of all sea regions and gives you Lord Recruit rank and Recruit rank for Dragon Ship Admirals. So both Sea Helms and Dragon Ships are Admirals. Now the problem that Creative Assembly apparently has is that what you can do is you can go to every faction with which you have visibility and just go and declare war on those factions. And yes, including Clan Helheim, because they will accept a peace agreement after turn 1 or turn 2. So that can give you a lot of money. The thing about that is not some new issue. The idea of going to various major factions and declaring wars on the enemies they start with, and then defeating those enemies is nothing new whatsoever. It has happened since the release of Warhammer 3. It is not an old issue. It is an issue as old as the game has existed. But apparently now it is considered a problem that Creative Assembly needs to deal with. And it is, frankly, a bit ridiculous to consider it as a problem that they need to actually deal with, as opposed to many other problems. See, people will always cheese in a campaign. They'll always look to gain an advantage, in particular if they're looking to speed up their campaign. And the reason they want to speed up their campaign is because they want to unlock all the cool stuff in it. Not because they need it for victory. That's one of the problems that we do have. But let me show you exactly how this looks on turn 2, and also why it is so damn pointless to also consider as a problem for CA to deal with. Alright, so on turn 2, I have researched the Heralds of Civilization upgrade. I'm going to get the Waystone network. Here's what happens on turn 2. You get vision with virtually everyone, or the vast majority of factions around the map, and you can declare wars on them. You don't necessarily want to declare war on everyone. Keep in mind there are certain factions, especially Legendary Lord factions and Disorder factions, that you don't want to touch. But of course, there is a lot of money to be made in this process, undeniably so, that you can get. And then, of course, you can, get peace agreements as well, get a lot of money. Not that you're really gonna use that money for much in a campaign, really. And the reason I say that specifically is because much of the money you're going to get with respect to these kind of declarations of war is going to be funneled into your initial landmarks in your campaign. Because you do have a number of those landmarks on, non-aggression pact. That's a good amount of money. And what you're really going to do with that 7k, 30k, all that, is just going to go to the initial outpost and start building these landmarks, really just so you can have more elven colonies. That's the incentive structure right there for you to get that money. It's not to get armies, it's not to get power, it's just to be able to take more settlements as elven colonies. But here's where it gets ridiculous when we're thinking about the dynamics of a campaign. Because at sea, you have these locations that you can interact with as well. And these will produce enemy armies for you to deal with. Sure, This one in particular is ridiculously powerful compared to what you have before, but if the concern is money, if the argument is like, well, we need to prevent the player from having a significant amount of money, can we talk about that problem, or is that not a problem? Because declaring war on a ton of factions is certainly something that you can abuse and use and take advantage of, but so is just fighting a bunch of random armies. Some of them are harder than others, but at most, you're just building your landmarks slower, building an entire stack of troops, and not auto-resolving as I did there, in order to deal with those armies and easily tackle them. So it's not a it's not a solution to anything, what they're looking to do. It's just going to slow down the players in some way, but then incentivize them to do something else. But, oh, battles are awesome. Okay, sure, against rogue armies that you never know, and you can also easily deal with them after a couple of turns. This Aislinn is really good in terms of naval navigation, so these kind of random encounters at sea, he's going to have a lot more of them in his campaign. So Lokir, so the Vampire Coast, hell, anyone that has any kind of naval focus, including Wulfric, will get a lot of money. Or anyone that's near a coastline and gets these kind of events will get a lot of money. See, this is the problem of what Creative Assembly does. The way they handle campaign feedback and the way they handle campaign balancing, one of the things I've stated before, and I'll say it again, it seems to me a lot of the campaign designers don't play their own game. And what instead happens is that they leave that job to the community managers, the marketing team, and the PR team. Now, those might play the game, but they've also got the full-time job besides, dealing with the balancing and figuring out what the problems are. So what instead they do is they look at Reddit, they look at social media, they may look at content creators, but really things that get upvoted on Reddit, things that get talked about a lot on Discord, and that's not a great way of dealing with balancing in a game. Because the way social media works, and I say this as a content creator, is it's upvoting and pushing certain views that are not necessarily correct, but the ones that just feel right for a lot of people. But that's not how balancing should work. So you get in this ridiculous situation where the issue, which is declaring war on minor factions for money and region trading, etc., now suddenly get pushed to the forefront just because of Aislinn's situation. It is not a new issue. It doesn't matter if they fix it or not. It's not going to change a damn thing. This is what we get. So Creative Assembly has a limited QA team, limited time until the holiday season, which, based on what we've heard over the last couple of years, may very well start on December 15th. And this is what they think is important? I don't think so. So let's talk about the real problems in Aislinn's campaign and what Creative Assembly could do to fix those. See, the real problem with Aislinn first starts with how he takes settlements. Either he takes settlements as outposts, in which case he gives them to another elven faction, or he establishes them as a colony if he has the resources for it, if he has the colony availability. Now, the problem in doing so has to do with the fact that you cannot trade these colonies. So if we look at, say, this minor lizardman faction, or we can even go to Lufar Harkon and say, okay, I want a peace agreement, can I region trade? You can't region trade colonies. Now, some people might think that's perfectly suitable for Aislinn, but the problem it creates is that you can only give settlements to high elven factions, major ones. You can't give it to minor ones, you can't give it to other order factions. Like, if it was a limit of just giving it to factions you had good relations with, fair enough, or factions like, say, Gorok over here who's fighting the Skaven, okay, but that's not how it works. You cannot region trade. You actually could pre-launch, and then Creative Assembly is like, well, we don't think you should be able to region trade. That means this campaign is worse than others, because the main reason region trading was added into the game was not so people could abuse it for money. The main reason was to make AI empires work and diplomacy to work. So when you're playing Aislinn, you're inherently playing a more limited campaign than others. And even the unique systems that he's supposed to have, be it dedication, dragon ship supplies, and elven trade, those don't work either. Because in order to even get dragon ships, you need to either reach the mid-tier of each single tab over here, and that requires you to get a good amount of dedication. And it scales up the more you spend. So you do get an initial boost of 500 dedication at the beginning of the campaign after some objectives, but then it slows down to a trickle. And it's not something you can actually speed up. The main way you actually earn dedication is through the Seat of the Sea Lord, because that gives you 20 dedication per turn. Which, by the way, the fact that dedication is earned for a single structure in a tree that supposedly has 3 structures makes the other 2 completely irrelevant, ultimately. So much for the idea of choice. And same with trade. When you look at trade, well, the best structure for trade is the storage yard because it gives you up to 80 trade by default, and then plus 40 if there is a resource in that settlement. None of the other structures come anywhere close, and it's kind of hilarious to have even certain structures that consume trade, given the fact that trade is so important. But why is trade so important? Well, every structure you build in Elven Outposts costs trade. And if you want dragon ship supplies to actually upgrade dragon ships, assuming you can unlock more than one in your campaign, realistically the fastest way to get an extra dragon ship is to get Admiralty Forge. But dragon ships themselves are not useful whatsoever unless you have dragon ship supplies. So all these wonderful economic buildings that give you trade resources, money, etc., end up being pointless, because you end up spending all your elven trade on the maritime trade hold that you then upgrade into the Mistwalker Lodge or into the Voyager's Harbor. Voyager's Harbor is available by default. And this is the brilliant part of Crave Assembly, that a lot of Aislinn structures are locked, not even behind research, but behind the sewer domination. So ultimately, you end up with a campaign that is by default limited, doesn't play by the same rules, has a lot of gold so you can spam out infinite armies if you want to, but has the most restrictions on unit variety and hero varieties of any High Elven campaign. And that is not a joke either, because if we look at Elven colonies, yes, you can get up to Wild Lions of Crix and Silvern Guard at a regular tier 3 settlement and Skycutters and all that. But anything higher than that either won't be available or requires one of those technologies. And it's even better when you think of the fact that Elven trade is supposed to be this resources you can spend for money, and then you look at naval advancements, which all of them cost trade, and not a small amount either. Crave Assembly does love the resource system, but this is one of the worst implementations of it that I've seen. It was pretty bad in Pharaoh, and that was one of the main problems of Pharaoh. It was good in Troy when you had a starting position that gave it that. So Aeneas, and to a degree Hector, worked Sarpedon. And yes, I've played a lot of Troy, so I know what I'm talking about there. It didn't work when you limited resources, and that's the problem. The core identity that Crave Assembly went with after Troy and for Pharaoh and with Chaos Dwarves and now with Aislinn has been to try and limit resources to prevent the player from steamrolling, but they fail at that. If the idea is to limit the player, but, well, I'm just gonna say it flat out, boys and girls, they're not limiting shit. Because ultimately, you still have tons of money, and you can still use that tons of money to recruit unlimited armies without giving a damn fuck about it. You want money? Go to settlements and sack them. You want money? Go to spend your entire campaign dealing with sea corpses and shipwrecks and all that stuff. You want money? Lure your opponents into attacking you multiple forces and get 10 plus K gold. So if anyone has any conception whatsoever that Crave Assembly's brilliant idea of limiting the campaign speed with this works in any significant way, they are mistaken. Suffice to say. You cannot balance a game just because certain people scream on Reddit about cheese. You certainly cannot balance a game that in a campaign for a game around the idea, let's screw over the player at every opportunity, but let's then force him to fight the entire campaign with archers and spearmen, or ship company and ladder and sea guard, because that's how Creative Assembly does it. This is where Pharaoh's fundamental failures, because the same people who made Pharaoh worked on this is where the fundamental failure is. The idea that all those crappy units in low tier crappy units would be awesome to use for dozens of turns. They are not. And this is why Aislinn's campaign struggles. But we're not finished, believe it or not. Everything that I've just said, there's still more, believe it or not. In Aislinn's wonderful campaign dynamic is what happens when you confederate another legendary lord of the High Elves. Well, you get absolutely nothing. Except their armies. Their armies, none of their structures, none of their territories, and crucially, none of their landmarks. Problem here is, you don't even get elven outposts under the settlements they have that have landmarks in them. Because that's one of the things elven outposts do. They give you access to these landmarks if you set up outposts. You can do so throughout the campaign. Sure, there are certain events that puts one under Lothern, for instance. But unless you're going for that event and that's a choice, or you're taking a settlement and putting an outpost there, you'll not gain it. And you certainly will not gain it through regular diplomacy and confederation. All the territory that you've worked hard to get as a result of confederation is given to the United Maritime Patrol, which is a minor High Elven faction that you have no diplomatic relations with whatsoever. And also, if you try and confederate them, and by the way, you can, the game may just very well crash. So, please do tell me how it is a priority for Creative Assembly to fix an exploit or cheese that has been available since the launch of Warhammer 3, almost 4 years later, for one campaign just because Aislinn can get 30k gold from one source when he has 100 different sources that can fix it. As opposed to them fixing any, and I'm not talking about all of them, any of the issues that I've listed in this video. Now, people think that I'm just rage baiting or I'm trying to talk shit about Tides of Torment. No, I have spent 200 hours playing Tides of Torment before it came out. I saw these issues firsthand. In fact, I saw Creative Assembly make things worse pre-launch with some of the changes they implement. And I did talk about them. I made posts, I gave feedback, I talked about it, I mentioned it in videos, I mentioned it to them directly. They apparently prefer to listen to whatever is popular on Reddit, so good job on Creative Assembly, I suppose. And not that my view is better than anyone else's, but I also want to point out something else. There are a ton of other creators that have also listed issues, serious issues people are talking about right now, even if they're buried under downvotes on Reddit, that were known weeks in advance, and Creative Assembly could not give a single damn about any of them. That is where you get frustrated. Because you can see the problem, you give people a solution, or you highlight it, and they ignore it. And then they release a hotfix, mention they're going to take their sweet time with it, because we couldn't dare affect their vacation schedule, even though the reason we're in this situation is because they screwed up. Remember, their planning this year is why we ended up with Tides of Torment being released in early December. It wasn't the community. It was purely Creative Assembly's decision-making that led to it. And the things that they're going to prioritize are none of the relevant things that need fixing in this campaign, or the Kala, or Sail, or any of the bigger problems in the game. This is why people get angry at CA. I'm not even angry. I'm not even furious. I would say I'm disappointed. And the reason I'm disappointed is because they actually did better with Omens of Destruction, with the Kislev rework, and with Thrones of Decay. It's not something that we haven't had before. Because if you look at Ogres, if you look at Khorne, if you look at Thrones of Decay, the people handling those, they understood their own game. I can't say the same about the Tides team. Costin signing out.